Okay, girls, this is a continuation of today's lesson. Just some more examples for those of you that may be experiencing some problems. Here is another example. This question says, show that this equation 3x squared minus 4x plus 8 equals 0 has no solutions. Well, to find the solutions of that, we're going to use the quadratic formula, which is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, before I start, I'm just going to look at my quadratic equation. I can see that a is 3, which is the coefficient of the x squared. B is negative 4, just be careful there. And c is positive 8. So let's substitute into the formula. So we've got x equals, now negative b, so that's negative 4. You have to be careful there. Plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now b is negative 4, so negative 4 squared. Minus 4 times a is 3 and c is 8 over 2 times a, which is 3. So just be careful here. We've got negative 4, which is positive 4, plus or minus the square root of. Now, negative 4 squared is negative 4 times negative 4, which is positive 16. Then we've got minus 4 times 3 is 12. And 12 times 8 is 96. So it's 16 minus 96 over 6. Now the answer to this is 4 plus or minus the square root of, now 16 minus 96 is negative 80 over 6. Now this has no solution. The reason it has no solution is that we cannot take the square root of a negative number. Okay, so this therefore has no solution because we cannot take the square root of a negative number. So girls, if you're ever using the quadratic equation and what you get under the square root sign is negative, then there will be no solution for that equation. Okay, this is exercise 6.4, just another few examples, okay? Exercise 6.4, solve the following using the quadratic formula. It's question 2b. So 2x squared plus 13x plus 15 equals 0. So using the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. Now, we know that a is 2, b is 13, and c is 15. So x equals negative b, which is negative 13, plus or minus the square root of b squared is 13 squared, minus 4 times a, which is 2, times c, which is 15, all over 2 times a, which is 2 times 2. So it's negative 13 plus or minus the square root of 13 squared is 169 minus 15 times 2 is 30, 30 times 4 is 120. So it's minus 120 over 4. So it's negative 13 plus or minus the square root of, now 169 minus 120 is 49. Over 4. Now girls, sometimes what you get in the bracket underneath the square root sign, is a squared number. So we know that the square root of 49 is 7. Now so we get negative 13 plus or minus 7 over 4. Now girls, if this is the case, what it means is that this original equation up here, you should have been able to factorize it yourself without using the formula. So if you ever use the formula and you get a square number, such as 49 or 25 or 16, something like that, that can be square rooted, that is under the square root sign, then you'll get a whole number here. And what we've got here is, remember we've got two solutions, negative 13 plus 7 over 4, or we've got negative 13 minus 7 over 4. Sorry, that's just coming off the screen. So therefore my two answers, remember we do have two answers here. Negative 13 plus 7 over 4 or negative 13 minus 7 over 4. So negative 13 plus 7 is negative 6 over 4. And negative 13 minus 7 is negative 20 over 4. And of course we can simplify those to negative 3 on 2 and negative 5. Now, so notice our solutions for x are rational numbers. They can be written as fractions, okay? Now, what we could have done, this question was this, to solve 2x squared plus 13x plus 15 equals 0. So we could have actually factorized that one. So if you ever use the quadratic formula and you get fractions or whole numbers as your answers, it means you could have done this by normal factorization. So I'm just going to look at it now. So if I've got 2x and x, looking for the factors of 15, let's go. Now everything's got to be positive because two numbers need to multiply to give positive 15 but add up to give, well, it won't add up to give 13 in this case because we've got to be multiplying by the 2 and all that, but it will add up to give something positive. So if we put a 5 there and a 3 here, 2x times 5 is 10x, 3 times x is 3x, that will give us 13x. So we're going to write this out. Let's just check. So whenever you do a factorization, you must check. I even check, so you have to check, okay? Good mathematicians always check their work. So we've got 2x squared plus 10x plus 3x plus 15. Yep, that seems fine. So therefore, 2x plus 3 equals 0, or x plus 5 is 0, which means that x is negative 3 on 2, or x is negative 5. And if we look back up here, using the quadratic formula, we got the same answer as that. So I suppose if you find it really difficult to solve something by factorizing, you could use the quadratic formula, but the quadratic formula does require a fair bit of work there. So if you can factorize it, it is much better to practice your factorizing because it's actually a lot quicker if you can factorize it. Okay, just another question. It's question 2H from exercise 6.4. Solve 7x squared minus 17x minus 20 equals 0. I'm going to do it by crisscross. Oh, no, I'm not. Sorry. We're using the quadratic formula. I mean, if we did try crisscross, but you'd probably find that there's no solutions. You probably don't want to try crisscross. I mean, because just think, oh, you've got 7x and x, all the factors of 12, we could have 1 and 12. That's not going to work. 12 and 1 is obviously not going to work because I've got 84 and 1. You could have 6 and 2. That's not going to work because I've got, sorry, I'm off screen. I've got 42x and 2x. That's not going to give me minus 17. You could have 2 and 6. That's 14x and 6x. That's not going to give me, that's going to give me 20, or it's going to give me 8x. So none of these are working. You could try 3 and 4. That's going to give me 28 and 3. That's never going to give me 17. Or you could try 3 and 4 this way. That's going to give me 21x. Oh, and 4x. That could work. All right, we'll try that one. I'm going to put a minus and a plus. I just want to see if that works. Okay? Sorry, I know I'm a bit off track. Let me just see. I'm just going to try and solve it by factorizing 7x plus 4x minus 3. Let's have a look. 7x squared minus 21x plus 4x minus 12. It actually does work. So if this does work, it means that my answer is going to be either whole numbers or fractions. So let's just see, we get 7x plus 4 is 0, or x minus 3 is 0, which means that x is negative 4 on 7, and here x is 3. So look, this one could be factorized like that, but I'm going to do it using the quadratic formula again. So using the quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. So we've got negative b, so that's a is, if we look at the question, 7, b is negative 17, and c is negative 12. Okay, so I'll just make this a bit smaller because it's all coming off screen. So let's substitute that into the formula. Negative 17 is positive 17, plus or minus the square root of negative 17 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 12 over 2 times 7. Okay, going to need a calculator for this one. It's 17 plus or minus, I think it's the square root of 289 minus, I'll just get a calculator. So girls, you can actually do that all in one go if you're going to get your calculator out. So you can go negative 17 squared, which would just give you the same result as 17 squared. All right, minus 4 times 7 times negative 12. And my answer is 625. So I get 17 plus or minus the square root of 625 over 14, which is 17 plus or minus, now the square root of 625, I think is 25, and it is, plus or minus 25 over 14. So therefore we've got two answers. We've got 17 plus 25 over 14, or 17 minus 25 over 14. And that 17 plus 25, I think, is 42. So 42 over 14 is 3. And this is negative 8 on 14, which simplifies to negative 4 on 7. Now, these are the same answers as up here. X is 3, X is negative 4 on 7. Same thing down here. X is 3 and X is negative 4 on 7. So girls, as I said before, if you get whole numbers or fraction answers here for X, it means that you could have factorized your original equation. Okay, this next question is question 3K, again, exercise 6.4. Solve this equation, this quadratic equation using giving your answer in surd form. So again, our quadratic formula, x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. And we get that a is 3, b is negative 5, and c is 1. So we've got negative b, so it's negative 5. So it'll be positive 5, but I'll just write negative 5 plus or minus the square root of b squared. Now that's negative 5 in brackets squared minus 4 times 3 times c is 1. Sorry, not much room there. Over 2 times a, which is 2 times 3. So we get negative 5 is positive 5. Plus or minus the square root of, now we've got 25, because negative 5 squared is 25, minus 12. 25 minus 12 is 13, so 5 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 6. So therefore, our two answers are 5 plus root 13 over 6 and 5 minus root 13 over 6. Now we're just leaving those in surd form. These cannot be simplified because the square root of 13's got no factors. And there are no square numbers that go into 13, so that's your answer there to question 3K. You just leave your answer like that. The last question, question 4Q, solve using the quadratic formula, giving your answer in simplest surd form. Here is our equation. So we know that x is negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac over 2a. We know that a is 3, b is negative 10, and c is 5. So we've got negative 10. Plus or minus the square root of negative 10 squared minus 4 times 3 times 5 over 2 times 3. And we get, sorry girl, negative 10 is positive 10 plus or minus the square root of 100 minus, that's 100 minus 60, which is 40, over 2 times 3 is 6. Just checking that. 100 minus 4 times 15 is definitely 60, so 100 minus 60 is 40. Now, square root of 40, that can be simplified to, you think of all the square numbers. You've got 4, 2 squared is 4, 3 squared is 9, 4 squared is 16, 5 squared is 25. The number, 4 is the number out of all these that goes into that, so that would be 10 plus or minus the square root of 4 times the square root of 10 over 6. So 10 plus or minus, now we know that the square root of 4 is 2, the square root of 10 we can't simplify, over 6. Now girls, each of these numbers is over 6, so it's 10 over 6 plus or minus 2 root 10 over 6. Now, we can just simplify the first fraction. 10 over 6 is 5 over 3, plus or minus. Now 2 over 6 can be simplified to 1 over 3, so you can simplify with the whole number bits. So I'm not simplifying this 10 under the square root sign with this 6, I'm simplifying the whole number 2 and the whole number 6. So that can simplify to 2 over 6 is really 1 over 3, so it becomes 1 root 10. Now you just write that as root 10 over 3. So therefore, your two solutions here are 5 over 3. Now, because they're both over 3, I'm just going to rewrite it with one denominator. So 5 plus or minus root 10 over 3, which is, so my two solutions are 5 plus root 10 over 3, 5 minus root 10 over 3. And that's the end of that question. If you could please just now do the questions that you were set for homework in class today.